Viewers, welcome back to the show. Tonight's topic of discussion is compensation for injured children or minors. With me, I've got Don Maffia and Anna Hall, who are two lawyers practicing in this area of law. Don, what is a minor?
Under 18, Tony. So if a child is under 18, they're regarded as a minor for the purposes of what we're talking about tonight, which is the compensation under the Transport Accident Act, which is the act or the legislation that governs compensation to people injured in Victoria as a result of an accident, road accident.
And Anna, there are some special benefits attaching or pertaining to children that are injured in accidents that are available to parents that most people aren't aware of. Now, one of those is a practical assistance from a TAC immediately following an accident. What is that, Anna?
That's correct, Tony. So if a child is injured in an accident, the parents do have some additional rights, such as things like accommodation payments, and they can also have assistance with things with the child. So, for example, education aids in the classroom, along with the medical expenses that all victims of transport accidents are entitled to.
And what about travel costs, Don? For example, the parents could be living in the country or interstate.
So for parents of injured children, they have a right to claim for travel expenses to visit their children in hospital, but Tony, it also includes not only the parents, also includes siblings as well.
Okay.
So siblings can get that for that travel expenses.
And Anna, the key to that is they generally say that if family members are present in hospital, it helps people's rehabilitation.
Certainly. I mean, when someone's in a difficult position, has been injured, having their family around them is going to be some of the best medicine they can have.
Exactly.
And certainly for the family as well, it is important to keep in mind that if one of the family members are involved in an accident, there are counselling services available for the rest of the family as well.
That's it. That's it. Look, there's also no-fault financial assistance and loss of earnings. What does that entail, Don?
Now, for a minor, if they were an earner, so if they were working or had worked at the time of the accident, which generally means when they're 15 or so, if they're doing a little part-time job, they have an entitlement to weekly payments, which are known as loss of earnings for the first 18 months, and then loss of earning capacity benefits for the second 18 months. So it's a 3-year entitlement, Tony. And that's only if they're an earner. If they're not an earner, so if, say they're 1, 2, 3 years of age or whatever, they're entitled to receive loss of earning capacity benefits from when they turn 18 for a period of 3 years, if they've lost an earning capacity, Tony.
Okay. Anna, it sounds very complicated, doesn't it?
This is a very complex area of transport accident law. And when children are involved in accidents, you really want to make sure you get them the best services available. So it is very important that you do, see a personal injury lawyer if this is something that affects you.
Can I ask you this? Assuming the child's got a 50% whole person impairment, what does that entail, Don?
That would mean that they'll get loss of earning capacity benefits until they're 65, after 18, so 18 and 65, subject to review every 5 years by TAC. Okay. So 50% or more impairment, that's assessed in accordance with a particular guideline, which is the American Medical Association Guides to Evaluation of Impairment. And in Victoria, we're using the 4th edition. So there's a number of editions out there, but in Victoria, we only use the 4th edition for those assessments. And those assessments, Tony, usually take place to not only assess their entitlements to those weekly payments, if they're 50% or more, but they have an additional entitlement, Tony, which is known as an impairment benefit. For a minor, an impairment benefit can be paid in 2 parts. One's known as the additional minor's benefit and a lump sum impairment benefit.
I was just about to get to that. What is an additional minor's benefit, Anna?
So in addition to the impairment that Don's been discussing, the additional minor's benefit is a payment that can be made to the parent or guardian of the child who's been injured in the accident, and that can be ongoing. So whilst the child is under 18, that payment can be made.
And Don, how do they do it? What's the
assessment?
They
do the assessment. The payments start 18 months after the accident. The assessment's done if the permanent impairment assessment comes out greater than 10%. So let's say it's 12%. They get 12% of the maximum amount. The current maximum amount under TAC legislation is $162. So it works out to be around $20 or $30 per week from the 18-month mark each week to the parents until they turn 18.
Okay, it doesn't sound like a lot of money.
Well, if you're a child and you had an accident, it could be 10, 15 years of these payments per week, Tony. So it's not a lot. It can add up, not a lot. And then once they reach 18, if they still have a permanent impairment greater than 10%, and another assessment will take place, they get a further lump sum.
Anna, you touched on additional no-fault benefits for rehabilitation, care and schooling.
That's correct.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Under Section 60 of the Act, the TAC will pay for medical and like expenses so long as they're reasonable and related to the accident. Now, under that medical and like expenses, you can also seek things for minors such as I touched on, education aids in the classroom, assistance with schooling, those sorts of things. So there are additional benefits that may not be the things you immediately think of as a medical and like expense, but are certainly things that are important to consider if your child has been injured in an accident and does need a bit of extra assistance along the way while they're recovering.
Don, one of the biggest issues for parents and also the law in general is the right to sue at common law and its interaction with statutory benefits. Can you touch upon this?
Okay, so in Victoria, if a person's injured, they have a right to sue if they've sustained a serious injury. Now, under the Act, a serious injury is either 30% or more impairment, or if they've sustained a serious long-term physical impairment or serious permanent disfigurement, or a severe mental or behavioural disturbance, psychological trauma.
Can I stop you there for a sec?
Sure.
What it basically means is if it interferes with your day-to-day activities or capacity to work, that generally satisfies the serious injury test. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, for minors, if they've sustained a serious injury, they have a right to sue. Now, there's two ways you can go about it, Tony. A parent can bring a claim on behalf of the minor, or the minor can bring their own claim when they turn 18.
Now, when would you make this decision?
I think it depends on the circumstances. In my case, it really depends on the type of injuries. I've been involved in many of these cases where we did resolve it quite earlier on in the piece, in the sense that the child's still a minor, 2, 3-year-old, or your whatnots, but we resolved the case because it was easy to assess the damages, Tony.
Okay.
But there are many cases where, unfortunately, it's just a sit and wait, and we have to wait to see how the injury progresses, particularly if we're talking about head injuries. Head injury cases are very difficult to assess in terms of the young children. So if they are 2 or 3 and sustain a head injury, and it's interesting in the case that we'll talk about in the next segment, it's very hard to see the effects of such injuries until the child goes through all their milestones, go through schooling, and then you can see how
Well, Don, on that note, we do have to go to a sponsors break, so viewers, please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly.